और इस वक्त हम देख सकते हैं कि
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Nitin Gadkari are inaugurating an emergency landing strip at the Gandharv Bhaskar section on National Highway 925 in Barmer, Rajasthan. Both ministers in the cockpit of the jet that will be among many that will touch down here. On Wednesday, the Indian aircraft, including C-130J and 32, carried out a successful takeoff and landing, while Sukhoi 30 MKI attempted low flyby and touch-and-go maneuvers on this strip. The new national highway adjoining the border with Pakistan will facilitate the vigilance of the Indian Army as well as strengthen the basic infrastructure of the country. Not just that, the airstrip will also provide support to the Indian Air Force. The 3-kilometer stretch on the national highway has been built with a cost of 36 crore rupees. These are the live visuals coming in on your screen. This is the first time that a national highway is going to be used, if required, as an emergency landing of aircraft of the Indian Air Force. That is why it is such a big news. The Indian Air Force jets, remember, on a national highway. That is because it is now going to be a part of an emergency strip. But what makes all of this so much more thrilling is the fact that the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Minister Nitin Gadkari not just inaugurating but are in the cockpit of the jet.
Unimaginable for any other tactical transport aircraft. The aircraft has been the cornerstone of air transport operations in the Indian Air Force ever since its induction.
These are the visuals coming in on your screen. On Wednesday, Indian aircraft, including C-130J and 32, carried out successful takeoff and landing, while Sukhoi 30 MKI attempted a low flyby and touch-and-go maneuvers on this strip. The new national highway adjoining the border with Pakistan will facilitate the vigilance of the Indian Army, but importantly strengthen the basic infrastructure of the country. Remember, this is all about providing support to the Indian Air Force. The 3-kilometer stretch on the national highway has been built with 36 crore rupees budget. But when the ministers themselves take to the cockpit, take to the inauguration and show the prowess of the Indian Air Force. Remember, all of this is a precautionary measure. The fact that a national highway could just be used by the Indian Air Force if required, preparing for that as an emergency landing strip. That is Nitin Gadkari arriving at that location. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh as well. Live visuals there on your screen. This is the National Highway 925 in Barmer in Rajasthan, and in just a short while the ceremony to begin. Just to tell you about which possible aircraft carried this successful takeoff and landing. It was Indian aircraft including C-130J and 32 carrying out that takeoff and landing, while Sukhoi 30 MKI attempted a low flyby and touch-and-go maneuvers on that strip.
Cross the national highway or go towards the aircraft. We want such a note. कृपया अपना ध्यान रखें, निशानी पूरी रखें।
किस तरह से वायुसेना अपने लड़ाकू और ट्रांसपोर्ट विमानों को इसी हाईवे पर उतार।
We're staying with this visuals. This is the top developing story. This is all about, remember, the armed forces and the government getting together to reflect on the prowess, on all possibilities that are being explored. Take a look at that, the landing that is being done by the aircraft, and an emergency landing, if so to say, required on a national highway. That's National Highway 925. It is in Rajasthan and Barmer, and for the first time it appears that this is being attempted, and of course for any future possibility that is required. Let's go across to defense editor Abhishek Bhalla joining me. Abhishek, now for the viewer who's watching, it is important to put this in perspective. One, is it perhaps the first time that a national highway like this is being used as a precautionary measure of an emergency landing strip? And how significant is this decision and inauguration today? Abhishek.
Pooja, in the past, similar landings have taken place at expressways or highways. But as part of a new project, this is the first time that a national highway is being designated as an emergency landing strip. In all, there are 28 such locations that have already been identified, and development of those highways, keeping in mind how they can cater to the Air Force, has already started. This particular highway is in Jalore district, close to Barmer, and the international border with Pakistan is about 40 kilometers from here. There are also a lot of residential villages close by, so security measures, keeping that in mind, have also been taken. Other than this emergency landing facility, there are also 3 helicopter bases, places where helicopters can land to assist in operations. All Indian Air Force aircraft and their transport fleet can land at this airstrip, which is 3.5 kilometers on this highway. A little while back, C-130J Hercules of the Indian aircraft landed here, in which Defence Minister Rajnath Singh was there, along with Road Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari. So perhaps, yes, a big breakthrough in a sense that this is the first designated emergency landing strip that is functional now for the Indian Air Force. Under normal circumstances, this will function as a national highway, but whenever the Air Force needs needs to carry out any operation, they can use this strip for that as well.
And Abhishek, now that you've mentioned that there have been a similar instance in the past, I do remember, I think in 2017, there were Indian Air Force jets that had attempted mock landings, and I think that happened on the Agra-Lucknow Expressway, but that was more like an initiative to show that there is a possibility, if required, for these aircrafts to land. And today what we see here on our screen is definitely pertinent. Remember, this is a national highway, a strip of about 3 kilometers that is going to be now made into an emergency strip, and a little over 3 kilometers. And when ministers themselves not just inaugurate, not just cut a ribbon, but also join in the cockpit, and that is perhaps a reflection that the country, the government, and importantly the armed forces are getting that boost, that these possibilities are, if required, there's a tarmac ready even on a national highway. But also, Abhishek, adding on to that, of course, this could only be an emergency situation, and this is already a very active National Highway 925 in Rajasthan. So how does it really get worked upon, get functional when it is required? Because if it's an active national citizen highway, civilian highway, how does it get used as an emergency landing?
Well, Pooja, at any point of time, if the Air Force needs to use it, obviously, the national highway then is closed for regular traffic like it is right now, because it's not possible to have aircraft landing at this airstrip and the traffic plying on the highway. So that's definitely clear that whenever the Air Force needs to use it, that's why it's called an emergency landing facility. So only in circumstances where the Air Force needs to amplify its air bases can this landing strip be used as an air strip, just like an Air Force station has a landing strip. This can double up as one. It's a significant development because, as I said, that earlier landings have taken place, but that's more to show the capability that this is possible. But this is part of a long-term project, and this is the first designated emergency landing facility that will be functional from today.
Abhishek, what are you picking up on the itinerary of the Defence Minister? Is he likely to interact with the Indian Air Force personnel now that he's already there in Rajasthan? Is that on the schedule today for either of the ministers?
Yes, first of all, there will be a demonstration of the operations that Air Force can carry out from this landing strip. He will be witnessing that. also, interacting with the senior officers of the Air Force. And another important development is to take place after this event, where the Indian Air Force will induct a new missile system, medium-range surface-to-air missile system will be inducted in Jaisalmer. That is in the second half of the day. The Raksha Mantri is expected to attend that as well.
I do have a question, Abhishek. According to you, why do you think that this specific national highway has been chosen as an emergency airstrip? Because, of course, throughout the country, that may have been a possibility. Do you think it could be because of the border location or any other strategic situation that this airstrip has been chosen by the government and by, of course, the Indian Air Force?
Well, one of the reasons is the close proximity to the international border with Pakistan, which is about 40 kilometers away. But having said that, the 28 locations that have been identified, not all of them are close to the borders. While some are close to the borders, like Rajasthan has 2 more such landing strips coming up, which will again be near to the international border with Pakistan. But amongst those 28, not all will be close to the borders. Some will be in Haryana, Karnataka, West Bengal. So it's scattered across the country, but many of those will be close to the borders to assist operations in case there is an emergency, and more specifically a military emergency.
Do tell us, Abhishek, about both the ministers sitting in the cockpit of the fighter jet, and of course when that landing and takeoff took place, that would have been a sight to see.
Yes, Pooja. In fact, the 2 ministers landed in the transport aircraft C-130J Hercules of the Indian Air Force, and they travelled in that aircraft, and that's the aircraft that landed here first. What we are likely to see in some time from now is the landing of a Su-30 MKI fighter jet of the Indian Air Force. Other than that, we'll see some operations, a mock drill of an operation being done by a Jaguar aircraft as well of the Indian Air Force. So in totality, what we are witnessing is how fighter jets and transport aircraft can function, can operate smoothly from this emergency landing facility.
So this is, you've mentioned a very important point, and I think it's important to elaborate on that, because with the different aircrafts that are attempting this landing, there was the C-130. Now C-130, remember, is a military transport aircraft. There was also AN-32 that carried off a successful takeoff and landing, and Sukhoi 30 MKI. So Abhishek, do tell us about that because it's not just, as a viewer may think, that it could just be a fighter aircraft. This is also about the transport aircraft, a military aircraft nevertheless, but in different capacities that are being attempted to land at the emergency airstrip.
Yes, Pooja, I mean, these are the air assets of the Indian Air Force that operate every day from their various air bases across the country. So it's important to showcase the capability when one is, inaugurating an emergency landing strip such as this. And that's the reason why both transport aircraft as well as fighter jets will be landing here today. The one transport aircraft has already landed. The Su-30 will land in some time now. The Jaguar fighter jets will also carry out a mock operation. They won't land here, but it will be a sort of a fly past, if we can say so. And it's just a way of showcasing that the Indian Air Force is fully prepared to use an emergency landing strip such as this, because this is not going to be a one-off. There are several other locations that have already been identified. So it's a big project that the Indian Air Force, with close assistance from NHAI, is working on. The NHAI has carried out studies in other locations as well. So in time from now, maybe in a couple of years, we'll have perhaps all 28 of these identified locations fully functional as emergency landing strips that the Indian Air Force can use.
So take a look at that. Different aircrafts from AN-32, C-130, and also Sukhoi 30 MKI, all participating in that takeoff and landing. Remember, one is a transport aircraft, one is a fighter jet as well. Different aircraft as Indian Air Force assets are attempting those maneuvers. So it is a big day. This is, remember, the Indian Air Force ensuring that if required, only for emergency, ever as an option, there could be our national highway ready. But Abhishek Bhalla is also telling us that one, while this is the first emergency landing airstrip for India, which is in Rajasthan, it is almost 5 kilometers. But importantly, there are going to be many more across the country, and that are also being worked about. Abhishek, could you tell us right now about some of those options? In which states are they being explored, or that is something information that we cannot divulge at the moment?
No, Pooja, I mean, 3 of these are in Rajasthan itself, and there are others that are coming up in Haryana, Punjab, West Bengal, Karnataka. So it's going to be scattered all across the country. Jammu and Kashmir is also one location that has been identified there as well. Yes, it's a long-term project that the NHAI and Indian Air Force are working together on.
Yes.
As far as this particular stretch is concerned, now that it's ready, it will be a big boost for the Air Force and also for the NHAI that is working on this project in other locations as well, because now they know what exactly needs to be done. Because remember, this is a regular highway for regular traffic, and
yes,
to have a separate strip only for emergency operations of the Indian Air Force in itself is a huge task. It's a big challenge. It's not something that the NHAI does every day. So in those terms, a lot of planning has to be done, and to have a full-fledged airstrip on a highway is quite a task which the NHAI is carrying out, and perhaps carrying out pretty well.
So clearly for now, we are jet, set and ready for emergency operations in the country. Remember, all of this only to ensure that our Air Force assets, if ever required in any situation, and given the sensitive border situation that is unfolding in the past few months as well, that the Indian Air Force is always ready. Always ready, has its options intact, and this is the National Highway, the authorities of India, the NHAI, and of course the Indian Air Force, the government, all of them working together to ensure that not only Barmer but other airstrip are also ready. On one side, you see Defence Minister Rajnath Singh sitting, and we are being told that Rajnath Singh and Nitin Gadkari, both of them were in the cockpit of the jet as well. The inauguration ceremony, meanwhile, is still underway. Also expected to interact with the Indian Air Force personnel in just a short while. But the visual of the day, is this: the Indian Air Force aircraft. There is the C-130, there is also going to be Sukhoi 30 MKI, and of course the AN-32. Different aircraft. One is a transport aircraft, one is a fighter jet. All of them attempting these landings, takeovers, maneuvers, just to ensure that if required in emergency situations, we have a civilian highway, a national highway ready for our Air Force. And all of this, remember, requires a lot of coordination. And Abhishek, that again would be my second question to you, that the coordination also will have to be upbeat, because we are talking about a civilian highway, we are talking about emergency situation here.
Not just between the Air Force and the NHAI, but also the entire district administration, because there are residential areas close to the landing strip along the highway. In fact, here also, there is clear-cut fencing which is put in place to make sure that civilians living in the area, especially at a time like this when the airstrip is being used for air operations, they do not venture into the area.
Correct.
There is a lot of police deployment as well to make sure people do not come towards the airstrip, because this again, this again is a complete, as of now, as I see it right now, it resembles an Air Force base and not a
regular highway. Yes,
highway. So it's challenging, for the Air Force, for the district administration, and also for the National Highways Authority of India.
Now, someone watching right now this telecast, Abhishek, would wonder that there are, of course, Air Force stations around. The Indian Air Force doesn't really require any sort of special permission. Of course, if in an emergency situation, all sort of coordination would be easily available. Why do you think that all of this coordination is important to be checked and ensure that like this, a ceremony needs to be done? Because for someone watching, they may think it is the landing like this in an emergency situation can be easily made available. But it is important to have a solid airstrip to even land. If you can tell us more about that.
It's a lot of work has to be done on a project such as this because, it has to be fully operational as an Air Force base.
Yes.
At least the landing strip has to be exactly like the one that is there in an Air Force base. And that is what has been achieved on this highway here. And, while there is a motorable road, adjacent to the motorable road, there is a landing strip as well. So that's the basic requirement of an Air Force airstrip which needs to be fulfilled, and that's what has been done by the NHAI here.
All right, Abhishek, I'll just give you a short breather there just for the viewers who have tuned in. Today is a big day with regard to the Indian Air Force and the first airstrip that India has finally managed to have. This is in Rajasthan. Many more airstrips are also scheduled. Defence Minister Nitin Gadkari are inaugurating an emergency landing strip that at the Gandharv Bhaksar section on the National Highway 925. This is in Rajasthan in Barmer. Both ministers also were in the cockpit of the jet. That will be among many that will be on the touchdown here. We're talking about Lockheed C-130 Hercules. We're talking about AN-32. They've already carried out a successful takeoff and landing. There's also Sukhoi 30 MKI attempting a low flyby and touch and go maneuvers on this trip. All of this is important because if required at any point, and Rajasthan is an international border, adjoining the border with Pakistan, will also facilitate the vigilance of the Indian Army.
देवियों सज्जनों आप सुखोई 30 की लैंडिंग लाइट्स को देख सकते हैं मैं आपको सचेत करना चाहूंगी कि
And now the fresh visual that has come in, that is the Sukhoi 30 MKI. Now that is landing. Remember, C-130 Hercules, the transport aircraft, had already landed. Take a look at this beautiful visual. Remember, this is a fighter jet and Sukhoi the Sukhoi 30 MKI currently landing on a national highway. That's a national highway 925 in Rajasthan, looking no less than an Air Force airstrip. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, of course, applauding. We also have Indian Air Force Chief R.K. Bhadauria sitting there. This is a big moment because for people who may not understand, and that is Abhishek Bhalla with the ground report.
Such locations across the country that can function as emergency landing strips. This is a big project of the Indian Air Force which will see fulfillment in a few years. With camera person Pradeep Gupta from Jalore, Abhishek Bhalla for India Today.
All right, Abhishek, if you can hear me, so we are being told that is the Sukhoi 30 MKI that has already landed. And what a beautiful visual there to see that an Air Force aircraft landing on a civilian highway. What a significant moment there amid the applause from the Defence Minister and the Indian Air Multi-sensor tactical reconnaissance system, aircraft and tactical reconnaissance sword, which can detect enemy targets with high resolution.
Well, that was a lovely sight, Pooja, and the Su-30 touchdown on this airstrip that is clearly visible now. And what we will witness in a few moments from now is the Jaguar fighter jet of the Indian Air Force that will be doing sorties around this landing strip. And we can clearly see, if I'll ask our camera person Pradeep Gupta to just show the background. You know, this is also a residential area, so there are people living here close to the landing strip. So that becomes a big challenge also for all the authorities to ensure that whenever this strip is being used by the Air Force, all measures are taken just like they've been taken now. There is a barricading done so that people cannot venture into this area. In all, 28 such landing strips have been identified across the country by NHAI and the Indian Air Force, where similar emergency facilities are coming up. Not all are close to the borders. Some will be in the hinterland as well. But the idea is to have emergency landing strips on highways that can amplify the Air Force's capabilities in case there is a military emergency. So while there are air bases close to this landing airstrip, but this one will only supplement the Air Force's operations whenever required.
Abhishek, what you're telling us is important, and I want to stay with Abhishek Bhalla there on the ground. Remember, there are Air Force stations in Rajasthan along the border areas, but there needs to be an emergency landing strip. That is why this specific civilian highway, Highway 925 in Barmer, has been chosen. If ever required, Indian Air Force and of course the district administration will ensure that the strip that you see, a civilian highway, a regular highway for the traffic, for the countrymen, will immediately be cleared, sanitized, and that is where our aircraft of the Indian Air Force can immediately land. That is a precautionary measure as an asset that the country is taking. So the C-130 Hercules already having landed a transport aircraft. The AN-32, another transport aircraft, already managing that landing as well. But of course, the most beautiful visual that we just saw via Abhishek Bhalla was about the Su-30 MKI, the Sukhoi 30, managing that landing, and that as an Indian Air Force aircraft, a fighter jet landing on a civilian highway. But Abhishek, as you are telling us, we see the visuals of Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and also the Roadways Minister Nitin Gadkari sitting there discussing what next on the cards, and of course we could see the applause and the cheer as well. How do we go from here to next? Because this has now been completed. It appears it has been successful. When can we expect next few inaugurations? All right, Abhishek, as I'm talking to you, we see another aircraft landing. If you can tell us more about that, which aircraft can you see there landing on the airstrip?
Yes,
will carry out a landing for the first time on National Highway. देवियों और सज्जनों, आपका ध्यान मैं फिर से दाहिनी ओर ले जाना चाहूंगी. आपके सामने वही सुखोई 30 विमान.
Yeah, we can just see another fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force which is approaching the airstrip. Once again, clearly demonstrating the capabilities that the Indian Air Force will have from this landing airstrip. A Su-30 MKI has landed a little while earlier. Once again, we are saying another Su-30 MKI that is just touched down upon the airstrip. Very clear visuals of the fighter aircraft, landing, touching down on this airstrip. And as we've been discussing, this is the importance of this project, where this particular highway doubles up as an emergency landing field for the Indian Air Force. The landing area is about 3.5 kilometers. The runway is exactly the same as what you see at an Air Force base. So, the situation is exactly the same as far as the Air Force operations are concerned. And that's why we've been repeating how big a task and what big a challenge this is, because where we are standing right now is a normal metal road which is used for regular traffic, and adjacent to that metal road is this landing strip. That landing strip is 3.5 kilometers, and when the Air Force is not using this area in an emergency situation, the entire road, the entire stretch will be used for regular traffic. That's not the case right now, because what we are seeing, what we are witnessing is the first demonstration of air operations from this emergency landing strip that has been inaugurated by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, also the Road Transport and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari. The two also flew in a C-130J Hercules transport aircraft of the Indian Air Force that landed here a little while earlier, and after that Su-30 MKIs have also landed once again, giving a clear demonstration of what kind of operations can take place from this particular airstrip.
And Abhishek, with this landing that has taken place with another fighter aircraft on a civilian airstrip, which is now an emergency airstrip as well, should we say that the ceremony has concluded for now, or are we expecting perhaps more such attempts by the aircrafts of the Indian Air Force?
An AN-32 transport aircraft is expected to land also, Pooja, and in fact that's the aircraft that we will be also travelling into Jaisalmer. Jaisalmer is where another event is scheduled for, where the Defence Minister will be going. The Indian Air Force will be inducting a new missile system in their arsenal. That event will take place in Jaisalmer. So in a while from now, perhaps the AN-32 will also land. So what we have seen today is that the Indian Air Force has in their demonstrations shown that both their fighter jets as well as aircraft from the transport fleet can comfortably land here, and air operations can smoothly take place from this newly developed emergency landing strip.
Do tell us about the mood on the ground, Abhishek, because we're talking about a civilian highway. We're talking about Highway 925 in Barmer, Rajasthan. That must be looking like an Air Force station today. So how are you picking up on the mood on the ground? We already have Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, Road Transport Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari also there. What is the mood like? Do tell us.
Well, there is definitely a lot of excitement as far as the Air Force and NHAI is concerned, because that this is a big project for both the Indian Air Force and NHAI, and what we are seeing on our screen now is the Su-30 MKI that had just landed a little while back. That's taxiing its way after landing, and lovely pictures, Pooja. This is a great image of the Su-30 taxiing on what is actually a regular national highway. So this is something rare. It's not that Air Force aircraft have not landed on expressways or highways earlier. It has happened. But why this day is important? Because this is the first designated emergency landing facility on a national highway that the Indian Air Force can function from. So that's why this is a bit of a breakthrough, and in some time from now we'll have more such facilities across the country, because the NHAI and Air Force have already identified 28 more locations. Some of them, like this one, will be close to the borders, others will be in the hinterland. So in years to come, we'll see more of these highways that will double up as emergency landing facilities for the Indian Air Force.
Before I let you go, just a few final questions, Abhishek. As we see this beautiful fighter jet landing on a civilian highway where usually trucks, cars, commuters, civilians also drive past, we have, of course, the ministers and senior personnel also sitting. Is this perhaps an option that other countries also have, what India has chosen today? Have you heard of perhaps other countries also using or keeping that option open of a regular road or a highway for aircraft landing if required?
Pooja, those were the Jaguars carrying out a sortie just above the airfield. Two Jaguar aircraft fighter jets of the Air Force just went past the airstrip, once again giving a demonstration of how the Air Force can function from this facility. And it's a sort of a fly past that we are witnessing after the Su-30s that have landed. We just saw two Jaguars in tandem zip past the airfield. And yes, Pooja, your question on whether other countries are doing this, yes, there are certain other countries that have been using their highways as an additional or an alternative option for an emergency situation. And this is something that has been done in other parts of the world as well. And now India also making this, the Indian Air Force making this a sort of an official project of its, because as I said that, you know, it's not that aircraft have not landed on highways. It has happened before, but this is now the first time where a highway has been designated for these purposes, and in some years to come, more such highways will be designated as emergency landing facilities.
Right, like Abhishek Bhalla is telling us, a transport military aircraft, a fighter jet, different aircrafts from C-130 to Sukhoi to Jaguars there on a civilian airstrip. Abhishek, I think today it feels like October 8, which is the Air Force Day, and the fly past that takes place. It looks like perhaps other Republic Day, in fact. And these, what we see, are not regular visuals. And to see all of that appears like another celebration or event. But do you think, of course, these are very significant precautionary measures, whether it is for the military, for the Air Force, or for the country as a whole, to ensure these options are kept open, like this one as India's first airstrip? Hold on there, Abhishek. We want to play these visuals again. These are the aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Take a look at that. Landing on an emergency landing airstrip, a regular civilian highway. National Highway 925 in Barmer, Rajasthan. Amid applause of the Defence Minister, of the Road Transport and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari, of the Indian Air Force Chief R.K. Bhadauria, all of them sitting and perhaps congratulating these pilots who are ensuring, if required, at any point, India is not leaving an option open. Remember, this is not about just a show of strength or prowess. This is about looking at all possible options if ever required. And what a beautiful visual there. A visual of aircraft attempting maneuvers, attempting emergency landing at the Gandhar-Bhaksar section of the National Highway. The fact that C-130 AN-32 carried out a successful takeoff landing. Sukhoi 30 even attempted a low flyby, a touch-and-go maneuver on this trip. And of course, it appears Nitin Gadkari admiring, because it is his ministry's portfolio to have ensured that with the NHAI, the National Highway Authorities of India, to have this ready for the Indian Air Force. And now that it is ready, it is something, of course, Nitin Gadkari would want to sit back and enjoy this moment while there are maneuvers taking place, looking no less than an Air Force Day or any other celebration of the armed forces. Isn't it correct, Abhishek, that it looks like any other celebration that we are used to, not perhaps on a regular highway?
Certainly, Pooja. I mean, I'm witnessing this something like this for the first time. While in 2017, yes, there was landings at the Yamuna Expressway in Uttar Pradesh, but it wasn't an event such as this. This is demonstrating how the Indian Air Force can use a regular national highway as an airstrip, and that's why it is different, because this actually means that the Indian Air Force has alternative landing bases other than their Air Force stations if there is a military emergency. And what we have seen are demonstrations that have been carried out by fighter jets, two fighter jets, Su-30 MKI and the Jaguars. The Su-30s, of course, landed. The Jaguars did touchdown and were airborne within seconds once again. Before that, we saw a transport aircraft, C-130J Hercules, that carried the two ministers who are attending this event. So it's very clear that the Indian Air Force is extremely confident and comfortable by carrying out the full gamut of their operations. That includes Air Force fighter jets as well as once again we are seeing maneuvers by the Su-30 MKI above the airfield. So it certainly feels like an Air Force Day kind of a celebration. But this one is very different because this is not happening at an Air Force station, but at a regular national highway where otherwise you would see all sorts of vehicles flying on the road. But that same road is being used by fighter aircraft and transport aircraft of the Indian Air Force. So definitely a moment which is rare, but in time to come, as we heard from
as we are talking, Abhishek, there is of course the roar of these fighter jets in the air, but there's also patriotic music, Bollywood music I can hear in the background at that ceremony that is playing behind you. So I just want to stay with that visual there, and of course the ambient sound that we can hear as well. Abhishek.
In the Indian Air Force's inventory with multi-mission capability. The aircraft's features include super maneuverability, though the use of thrust vectoring engines, phenomenal payload capability, and lethal firepower with precision sensors, latest avionics, and long-range mission capability. A combination of these contemporary technologies provide the Sukhoi 30 MKI an unpatrolled advantage in the modern-day aerial battle.
वायुसेना की इन्वेंट्री में सुखोई 30 MKI सर्वाधिक बहुमुखी स्विंग रोल लड़ाकू विमान है। इस एयरक्राफ्ट की विशेषताएं हैं थ्रस्ट वेक्टरिंग इंजन का इस्तेमाल करके जबरदस्त करतब दिखाना, बेजोड़ पेलोड क्षमता, सटीक सेंसर्स के साथ मारक फायर पावर, नवीनतम एवियोनिक्स एवं लॉन्ग रेंज मिशन क्षमता इसकी मुख्य खूबियां हैं। आधुनिक तकनीक का यह गठजोड़ इस एयरक्राफ्ट को हवाई युद्ध में निर्णायक बढ़त प्रदान करता है और समय समय पर इसकी युद्ध प्रणाली में हमारी स्वदेशी कंपनियों द्वारा सुधार लाया जाता रहता है।
All right, so just translating what we heard in that ambient sound, the anchor talking about a thrust vector there at the ceremony. Take a look at that visual.
सुखोई 30 MKI आपके सामने एक लो ओवरशूट करेगा, तो जोरदार तालियों के गड़गड़ाहट से इस एयरक्राफ्ट का स्वागत कीजिए।
Landing strip of a national highway, and again taking off there. All these, remember, these are all sorts of maneuvers that the pilots are at this point trying, attempting. It is about the fighter jets. It is the transport military aircraft. They are trying to attempt different maneuver, whether it's a low flyby, whether it is an emergency landing. This is all being attempted, showcased to ensure that if ever required, we have all our assets ready, whether it is on the road, a highway, or whether it is the aircraft. What you see on your screens are, of course, the senior most personnel of the Indian Air Force who are sitting. That is the Indian Air Force Chief Archibald talking to Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, and Nitin Gadkari also, the Road Transport and Highways Minister, at the ceremony. But this is the visual of the day. The visual of fighter jets, their roar, that is being admired by not only, of course, the Air Force personnel, but the ministers for having achieved that combination, get it ready for the country as an Air Force asset. Remember the thrust vector that was being referred to for the fighter jet? It is basically to manipulate the direction of the thrust. That happens from its engine, controls the attitude or the angular velocity of the vehicle. All of this helps the fighter jet in times of war, or at any moment that we require a fighter jet there to represent our country, defend our borders. And there we have them right now arranging an emergency landing strip as well. For the viewers who have just tuned in, taking you through the background, what you're looking at is in Barmer, Rajasthan. That is an emergency landing strip that is being inaugurated, a first for India, at the National Highway 925. Ministers, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, Road Transport Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari. At that ceremony, they were even in the cockpit of one of the military aircraft. And what you see are different visuals of aircraft that have attempted landing, takeoff, maneuver in the air. From C-130 Hercules to AN-30, again another transport aircraft of the military. Then the fighter jet, of course, very popular, Sukhoi 30 MKI. They are attempting these different maneuvers. All of this, remember, right along the international border with Pakistan. We're looking at Rajasthan, of course, just a few kilometers away from Barmer is the Pakistan border. All of this, our precautionary measure will facilitate the vigilance of the Indian Army and, of course, the basic infrastructure for the Air Force as well. And at any point, the Indian Air Force, if requires, apart from its Air Force stations, to have its aircraft landing, we have that support ready. It's a little more than 3 kilometer stretch of the national highway. 36 crore rupees is the cost with which all of this has been arranged with the NHAI, the National Highway Authorities of India, and of course with the Indian Air Force, and depending on the requirement and capacity, it has been arranged, and we have that emergency landing ready for the Air Force assets. Abhishek Bhalla, Defence Editor, is on the ground to assess the mood, and of course these are visuals one by one that we are picking up for you. Now remember, you must have seen the aircraft landing, taking off of the Indian Air Force happens on different occasions. You know, whether it is the Republic Day or the Air Force Day on October 8th. But this is special. This is right on a national highway, a civilian highway, where otherwise there would be a regular traffic. And the Barmer Rajasthan highway is actually a very active highway. And what we see here are Indian aircraft, Indian Air Force's fighter aircraft landing, taking off. So it is no less than an Air Force base right now, right in the middle of the highway. And Abhishek Bhalla is on the ground telling us about all the latest. Abhishek, I understand because there must be a lot of heightened activity from where you're reporting. And but what you see on the ground, I can see through the screens, but I can only imagine how it feels right now to see a military aircraft landing on a regular national highway.
That's right, Pooja, and you know, this highway actually had turned into an Air Force base, at least for the last half an hour. The demonstration that was happening has gotten over now. We are expecting the Defence Minister to speak and address at this event now.
Okay.
But having said that, an important development, big breakthrough as far as this project is concerned, because this is the first designated highway that has now been designated as an emergency landing strip of the Indian Air Force. The landing strip is 3.5 kilometers long. It also has 3 helipads close by. So all air operations, be it transport aircraft, be it helicopters,
all right.
be it
Abhishek, I will just interrupt you there for just a short while because man of the moment in so many ways, Road Transport and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari is presently speaking. Remember, it was his ministry expected to prepare this landing strip. We have it ready. He's speaking.
वायु सेना प्रमुख RK भदौरिया जी, सांसद देवजी पटेल, श्री सुखराम बिश्नोई जी, वन और पर्यावरण मंत्री राजस्थान सरकार, श्री नारायण देवल विधायक रानीवाड़ा, श्री सतीश रेड्डी, उपस्थित सभी NHAI के, एयरफोर्स के और राजस्थान सरकार के सभी अधिकारीगण और उपस्थित भाई और बहनों, आज का दिन ये बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक दिन है कि आदरणीय राजनाथ सिंह जी के द्वारा आज हमारे रोड कम एयर स्ट्रिप, इसका उद्घाटन उन्होंने खुद हवाई जहाज में आकर यहां किया है। मुझे बहुत इस बात की खुशी है कि एक बार चर्चा करते समय, प्रधानमंत्री जी के यहाँ प्रेजेंटेशन करते समय इस प्रकार का सुझाव उनके सामने रखा था। तब हमारे विभाग ने भी कहा था कि ये हमारा मैंडेट नहीं है, पर इसमें आउट ऑफ बॉक्स जब कोई भी बात होती है तो नियमों के लिए उसके लिए थोड़ी तो तकलीफ होती है। पर मुझे खुशी है कि डिफेंस मिनिस्ट्री ने, एयरफोर्स के अधिकारियों ने भी बहुत अच्छा सहयोग किया है और हिंदुस्तान में हमने पहली बार रोड कम एयर स्ट्रिप का ये निर्माण किया है। ये जो सत्ता-गांधव स्ट्रेच है NH 825A, ये भारतमाला परियोजना के तहत करीब 45 करोड़ की लागत से 3 किलोमीटर लंबी एयर स्ट्रिप हमने तैयार की है, जिसके बारे में अभी बताया गया है कि इसकी क्वालिटी बहुत अच्छी है, क्योंकि एयर स्ट्रिप करते समय स्वाभाविक रूप से बहुत मजबूती भी लगती है। ऑस्ट्रेलिया में हमारे भारतीय वैज्ञानिक ने जो आयरन स्लैग है, स्टील स्लैग, इसका यूज करके उन्होंने एयर स्ट्रिप बनाई है और जिसको ऑस्ट्रेलियन सरकार ने मान्यता दी है। और हमारे देश में ये स्लैग, ये वेस्ट मटेरियल है। तो हम लगातार इनोवेशन और रिसर्च के द्वारा नए नए प्रयोग करते हैं, क्योंकि इनोवेशन, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, साइंस, टेक्नोलॉजी, रिसर्च, स्किल एंड सक्सेसफुल प्रैक्टिसेस, वी नेम इट एज ए नॉलेज एंड कन्वर्शन ऑफ नॉलेज इनटू वेल्थ इज द फ्यूचर फॉर द कंट्री। तो मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि आज ये काम हो रहा है। वैसे गागरिया से बकासर तक तथा सत्ता से गांधव तक 1135 करोड़ रुपए की लागत से ये 197 किलोमीटर 2 लेन प्योर शोल्डर का मार्ग और ये एयर स्ट्रिप तैयार की गई है। और इस स्ट्रिप का उपयोग भारतीय वायुसेना को आपातकालीन लैंडिंग के लिए निश्चित रूप से होगा। मेरी जानकारी ऐसे है कि इसमें 350 किलोमीटर, शायद 300 में कोई एयरपोर्ट नहीं है। अभी मैंने रावत साहब को कहा कि यहाँ भी छोटा सा एयरपोर्ट बनाकर जगह लगेगी तो हम दे देंगे आपको, और उसमें आप आपका डिफेंस का भी करिए, और थोड़ा बाजू में सिविल एयरपोर्ट भी छोटा सा बन जाएगा, तो प्राइवेट एयरलाइन से भी जाना आना अगर शुरू हो जाएगा, दिन में 1 बार 2 बार आएंगे, तो यहाँ के लोगों को भी सुविधा प्राप्त होगी। उसके लिए हम पूरा सहयोग करेंगे और एयरफोर्स के अथॉरिटी का भी इसमें मार्गदर्शन लेंगे। हमारा विशेष रूप से आज ये जैसा ऐतिहासिक उद्घाटन राजनाथ सिंह जी आपके हाथ से हुआ है, तो मुझे खुशी हुई कि इस साल हमने 3 वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड किए हैं। ये वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड तो नहीं है, पर एक ऐतिहासिक क्षण है। पहला रिकॉर्ड ये हुआ है कि हम लोग 2 किलोमीटर पर डे रोड बनाने तक आए थे। इस बार हम हाईएस्ट इन द वर्ल्ड है। कोविड होने के बावजूद भी हमने 38 किलोमीटर पर डे रोड कंस्ट्रक्शन किया है, जो वर्ल्ड में सबसे हाईएस्ट है। दूसरा रिकॉर्ड हमने राजस्थान और गुजरात की भूमि पर किया है कि मुंबई और दिल्ली के बीच में हम लोग एक्सप्रेस हाईवे बना रहे हैं, जिसका 60-65 तक के काम पूरा हुआ है। और बड़ौदा के पास 4 लेन पेव शोल्डर सीमेंट कंक्रीट का रोड 2.5 किलोमीटर का हमने 24 घंटे में पूरा करके कंक्रीट रोड, उसका भी वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड हुआ है। तीसरा जो वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड है, हमने बीजापुर से सोलापुर तक सिंगल लेन बिटुमिन रोड 26 किलोमीटर 1 दिन में बनाया, और वो भी वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड बना है। कल जब आदरणीय एयरफोर्स चीफ मेरे पास आए थे, तो मुझे बता रहे थे कि इस एयर स्ट्रिप बनाने के लिए हमको 1.5 साल लगता है। तो मैंने उनको कहा कि अभी हम आपके लिए बनाने का काम जरूर करेंगे, और 1.5 साल के बजाय हम 15 दिन में आपको एयर स्ट्रिप बना कर देंगे, अच्छी क्वालिटी की। अगर आप हमको बताएंगे तो NHI के तरफ से निश्चित रूप से इसका उपयोग होगा। आज विशेष रूप से यहाँ 3 हेलीपैड भारतीय सेना की आवश्यकता के अनुसार कुंदनपुरा, सिंघानिया और बकासर गांव में हमने 3 हेलीपैड भी बनाए गए हैं, जिसका निश्चित रूप से हेलीकॉप्टर को उपयोग होगा। और राजनाथ जी, हम दिल्ली मुंबई हाईवे पर ऐसे 22 ग्रीन हाईवे बना रहे हैं। अब दिल्ली के मेरठ का उद्घाटन अभी 15-20 दिन में करेंगे। आप अनुमति देंगे तो आपको ही लेके जाएंगे। जो 4 घंटे लगते थे वो 45 मिनट में हो रहा है। दिल्ली से देहरादून 2 घंटे में करेंगे, दिल्ली से हरिद्वार 2 घंटे में करेंगे, और दिल्ली से जयपुर भी 2 घंटे में करेंगे, और बेंगलोर से चेन्नई भी 2 घंटे में पहुंचा देंगे। और इसके साथ साथ दिल्ली से मुंबई 12 घंटे में हो जाएगा, और दिल्ली से अमृतसर 6 घंटे में हो जाएगा, दिल्ली से चंडीगढ़ 2 घंटे में हो जाएगा, और साल भर में ये सब काम पूरे होंगे। मैं विशेष रूप से एयरफोर्स का और आभारी हूं कि हमारा एक और डीप प्रोजेक्ट है कि मानस सरोवर को पिथौरागढ़ से जाने का। वहां बहुत कठिन स्थितियां हैं, और उस समय एयरफोर्स के लिए मैंने रिक्वेस्ट की थी। एयर वाइस मार्शल उस समय देव साहब थे, और MiG-26 विमान से हमने हिमालय में ड्रिलिंग मशीन्स वहां लगभग नेपाल और भारत की सीमा पर लेकर गए और आज मानस सरोवर का रोड एयरफोर्स के सहयोग के कारण हमने लगभग 85% पूरा किया है। मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि अप्रैल में हिंदुस्तान के पिथौरागढ़ से मार्ग से मानस सरोवर जाने का भी सपना निश्चित रूप से पूरा होगा। आज इस प्रकार का ही काम आपके सहयोग से हम इसका तो उद्घाटन हुआ और 19 जगह पर कर रहे हैं। इसमें से फलोदी जैसलमेर मार्ग इसका टेंडर जल्द होने वाला है। बाड़मेर जैसलमेर मार्ग इसकी तकनीकी जांच की जा रही है। पश्चिम बंगाल में हम लोग राजस्थान में 2 एयर स्ट्रिप है। पश्चिम बंगाल में खड़गपुर बालेश्वर मार्ग पर निर्माण कार्य चल रहा है। खड़गपुर केवझर मार्ग पर रक्षा मंत्रालय के साथ बैठक करके उचित निर्णय करेंगे। तानागढ़ से केकेडी के पास इस जगह पर आपातकालीन लैंडिंग निर्माण को लेकर प्रक्रिया शुरू हो गई है। तमिलनाडु में चेन्नई पंदुचेरी मार्ग पर आपातकालीन लैंडिंग इसी प्रकार की एयर स्ट्रिप विकसित करने के लिए हम टेक्निकल जांच कर रहे हैं। जब एयरफोर्स की अनुमति मिल जाएगी तो वो भी काम शुरू कर देंगे। आंध्र प्रदेश में नेल्लोर से ओंगोल मार्ग कार्य लगभग पूरा हो गया, एयर स्ट्रिप पूरी हो गई है। ओंगोल से चिलकालुरीपेट मार्ग ये भी कार्य लगभग पूरा होने वाला है। हरियाणा में हम इसी प्रकार का काम कर रहे हैं। मंडी डबवाली से उड़न मार्ग पर यह टेंडर होने वाला है। पंजाब में संगरूर के पास आपातकालीन लैंडिंग सुविधा बनाने की योजना है।
Made with a cost of 36 rupees, you're looking at the first emergency landing airstrip on a national highway 925 in Rajasthan for the Indian Air Force. The fighter jets, the transport aircraft, maneuver, low flyby, all of this, takeoff, landing on the national highway. We want to stay with this coverage after a very short break. Stay tuned. These are absolutely fantastic visuals that we are bringing to you from Rajasthan. After the break, we continue with it.